Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner Podcast number 266. My name is John, and joining me this morning as always is Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Good morning, bright and early.
Bright and early, and I'm emanating from Branson, Missouri here in the Ozarks. So I'm on vacation and just stealing a little time away here to knock this episode out because this week the Acolyte dropped one of the craziest episodes of Star Wars TV that we've seen. It was off the charts, and so there's no way I could wait until next week to record our response. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I know.
Yeah. All right, cool. So today we are going to talk about episode 5 of The Acolyte, entitled Night, of course, not in response to, but following last week's episode, Day. I think many of us basically knew this episode was going to be called Night, which was pretty sweet. But and Ryan, one of the conversations that I was having in our Discord, and maybe with you guys too, I can't remember, was about whether or not, we talked about it on the show actually last week, whether or not this week's episode was going to follow with, an immediate follow-up to last week's episode, or if it was going to do like, hey, maybe we'll do another flashback and make you wait a week to get back to the action. So I didn't think they were going to do that. And then we saw the writer tweeting about how the two episodes were kind of written together or whatever. So then I really didn't think they were going to do that. But I was very pleased this week when I turned it on and we were right back there on Kofar, just picking up where we left off the week before.
Yeah. And I mean, the episode wastes no time in getting us right into the conflict. There's no real preamble or anything. You're just right in it.
Yeah. And I don't know if we've talked about the show being slow. I think a few people have argued that the show is a little slow at times or something. Not this week. This week was
that.
Yeah, this week was full steam ahead, so that was awesome.
Yeah.
And so, it opens up, and the first thing we see is Osha waking up, on the ground, and that just leads us basically right into the fight between the Jedi and who is now being referred to by Lucasfilm as the Stranger.
I love it.
I don't know if you've seen that or not.
Yeah, I've seen it. What I love about this scene is you have Osha getting up and everything, and she's just she's looking around and trying to figure out what's happening, and then you just start hearing the lightsabers, and then it's getting louder and louder, and then it actually cuts to the all the colors of the lightsabers kind of flailing in the trees. It's
and I love that you
well
point
done.
that out. I love that you point out the colors of the lightsabers because this episode, of course, takes place at night, and much of it is in a dark forest, and those lightsaber colors definitely pop. It is pretty sweet to see a largely dark screen illuminated by these various colors of the lightsabers. Is pretty sweet.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it because this is a pretty it's a prolonged fight scene for basically the entire episode. But you're right, it is at night, and I was rewatching the episode, and I think a couple things kind of stood out to me. One, just because I was thinking about it, going into rewatching the episode, knowing everything that happens, will this still be enjoyable to rewatch, or will it just be kind of a dull, oh well, I know all the big story beats. It's just gonna be swinging around lightsabers. Am I gonna get anything out of watching it again? And the things I noticed were the choreography is so good, and the way things are shot keeps it really interesting. It's just visually interesting the whole time. And I think they avoided something that I remember was a big deal during Game of Thrones, when there would be nighttime battle episodes, and people would say like it was too dark, I couldn't even see what was going on, the way it was shot, I couldn't tell what was happening. They completely avoided all that, because this is like, it is a nighttime extended battle scene, but you can see what's happening and it's not boring.
Yeah, great cinematography, I think. I was reading something with the cinematographer the other day discussing how they were implementing the lightsabers, and sort of the choices they were making, and the preparation they were doing to make sure that all looked good on screen. And one of the cool things in the recent era of Star Wars is the way the lightsabers actually illuminate on set and then cast light on the faces and the surroundings of the actors. And so, he was discussing that and wanting the lightsabers to be as bright as possible. But also, I thought this was interesting, pointed out that the more light they would put in them, the heavier they would be, and then the more difficult it would be, you know what I mean? Or I guess the more work it would be for the actors to be swinging them around and using them and stuff like that. So, but obviously the effect is added in post anyway, so, they can make that as bright as they want. But, he was hoping to get the lightsabers as bright as possible on set to, again, kind of cast the most illumination on the actors and the surroundings and things like that. So that's cool. And then I know this was shot on a set. And so, yeah, I think they were able to control, with a lot of talent and skill, able to control, how much light there was on the important subjects in shot, while also keeping the surroundings and everything dark and looking cool. You know what I mean? So that was, I think, very well done. And as you said, you can follow everything. It looks great, but it's in the cloak of night, right? So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, my big takeaway from this opening scene is how kind of brutal the violence is for Star Wars. You know what I mean? So that was my notes that I was taking as I was rewatching yesterday. I was like, there is a double impaling, which is pretty crazy, right?
My goodness. Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen that in Star Wars before. So the stranger impales one of the Jedi Dans and then pulls another Jedi Dan with the Force onto that same lightsaber. Very intense. There is, I think, an off-screen decapitation because there's a big tree.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So there's that as well.
When they blocking the shot, when they pan the camera so that the tree is blocking it. Yeah. I think it's safe to assume. Yeah.
You don't see a head roll around or anything, but I'm pretty sure that was a decapitation. So that's all pretty brutal. And then, as it goes on too, there's more kind of examples of that kind of stuff, as well. But then in this opening scene, there's I referred to it in my notes as the Obi-Wan leg wound, a la Attack of the Clones, that Yord receives right from the stranger, where it's like slash at the leg and then they kind of tumble over or whatever, like Dooku did to Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess another thing too would be this episode, the show overall, but especially this episode too. The lightsaber choreography is top notch. It is really, really great. Super great stuff. And so this scene to me, it's like, and we've seen this before a little bit in other stuff, but this is like a great marriage of prequel era Star Wars lightsaber fighting and, what came before. Because there are times, as much as I love the prequels, there are times that the lightsaber fighting is so flashy and so kinetic and so choreographed that it's maybe a little too much, or if not too much, it's just, it takes you out of it a little bit at times, But this is like perfect because it's hot, it's fast paced, it's super cool, and there's like really creative choreography going on, but it's not, hey, I'm using floating robot thing like jet skis to ride across lava. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's very like grounded, and there's there's weight to it. Like, it feels like, I don't know, it feels like a more heightened version of, like, I guess, like, of, like, samurai films, and where, you know, people are, like, pushing into the ground, and, like, you're feeling the impact, and it's not just, like, you know, kind of what you were describing in, like, the prequels, or, like, in a video game or anime where it's just, you know, it's just, like, swords flying everywhere, and everyone's, you know, doing flips and stuff. Like, it is, like, just really, I don't know, just really, like, gritty fighting with swords in the forest. And it's, like, it's moving fast, and there's, like, amazing athleticism happening here, but it doesn't really cross that line into, you know, total ridiculousness. And I think it's kind of interesting, because you think of, like, the opening scene with May and Indara in the first episode, and how there is that kind of, like, wire, you know, martial arts action happening there, where they are kind of, like, flipping up and running across, like, stairway rails and, like, all of that stuff. And there really isn't any of that in this scene. Like, it's much more, like, I don't know, just down to earth, like, literally.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, because, you know, seeing that opening sequence with Indara and May at the Phantom Menace screenings in early May, we talked about it on the show. I talked about it on the show, where I was like, man, this type of action is going to take some getting used to on my part, and I think it's cool, but I'm not so used to it. And I was just kind of thinking that a lot of the action sequences in the show would follow suit, right? That a lot of it would be, you know, the same kind of thing, right? It would be all this wire work, and, you know, which would be really fun too, but it hasn't really been that way at all. There hasn't been much of that outside of that opening scene, right?
I think some of May's stuff has been, like, when she's, like, first attacking in the Jedi Temple, she's doing some, like, pretty wild, like, flips and aerial attacks and stuff. But so it is kind of more of a her thing, and I think that is, like, her style of however she was trained is, like, this, you know, type of, like, martial arts style more than the Jedi stuff. And yeah, but I think, like, this episode is mostly Jedi fighting, and they're fighting like Jedi.
Well, and the Stranger too, though. The Stranger's fighting a similar style to them, I guess, right? So yeah. Yeah. Well, it's super impressive stuff in terms of the lightsaber fighting, and I love it. I've watched this episode twice. Sounds like you did too, right? You went and rewatched it. And I think this will be for sure, this is going to be one of those, like, you could go back and watch this episode anytime. Like, if you had 30 minutes to spare, it would just be a sweet episode to put on and rewatch. And there's a few like that from Book of Boba Fett, not Book of Boba Fett. Well, maybe there are a few like that from Book of Boba Fett. I don't know, but I was going to say The Mandalorian. There's a couple from The Mandalorian that are like that for sure. Yeah. So, okay, kind of as that continues, I mean, the Stranger wipes out, I would say, most of the Jedi Dans early on there, but there's still a handful of Jedi left, of course. Osha saves Yord, which is cool. Like, Osha intervenes. That's all I wrote down is Osha saves Yord. I'm trying to remember what she does exactly. I think. Do you remember what she does in that early part to save Yord? I think
she shoots the stunner.
That's right. Which
phaser.
Doesn't barely do. Yeah, it doesn't barely do anything to the Stranger. He just kind of, like, slowly turns over and looks at her, but it just
distracts him.
It distracts him. Yeah, so that's cool. Another thing I wrote down too, that I wrote it down later on in our notes, but that I love is this episode makes great use of wipes throughout the episode, because there is so much cross-cutting between different locations and sequences that it is frequently using wipes to transition from one, sequence to another, and it gave me big Star Wars vibes. I like that. Did you notice mini wipes in this episode?
Yeah, I think this show in general has been great about the wipes. Like,
yeah.
I noticed them, but not in like a distracting way, just in a, oh, that's nice way.
Yeah, it brings warm feelings to my heart kind of way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Osha saves Yord, and then not too much later, Sol saves Osha. The stranger seems about to kill Osha, and then Sol intervenes, and Sol orders Yord civilians to the ship, regarding Osha, which, and then that's one of those things too, where like Sol delivers that line, and then Yord says the same line pretty quickly afterwards. He says the same thing to Osha: civilians to the ship, because I got my orders, and I always have to follow my orders. Of course. But also, I think it just really it emphasizes that line, and I don't know what you thought about that line. To me, I felt like it was well intentioned, but also a little bit dismissive of Osha in a way. Well, she's a civilian, so you've got to get her to the ship.
I mean that tracks with how they've kind of been treating her. How the Jedi have been treating her. So yeah, I think it's fine. And I think that line, I think there's like a comedic beat to it. When Yord repeats it, that's not like laugh out loud funny or anything, but it's like, I don't know, it's just like an endearing, kind of rare light moment in this. It's the closest thing to like a joke in this entire episode.
Yeah, I mean, the stranger has a couple lines that are pretty funny too, but yeah. But he's terrifying, I guess. So that undercuts it a little bit. But he does have some lines that are played for twisted laughs, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe too soon to use to use the adjective twisted, huh? We'll get there in a second. No.
Sorry, you're hard.
Yeah. So civilians to the ship, and I think too. I think Sol. There is a paternal thing with Sol and Osha, I think, because she was his Padawan, and maybe will be again. I guess we'll see. But so I think there is a paternal element to it as well there. So it's like, obviously the intention to protect her. But I will say, as I was watching the first time, I was thinking like, what's going on here? Because I'm always like, and I don't know if I should be watching the show like this or not, but I'm always thinking, all right, where's the next mystery? Where's the next surprise? Where's the next, not what you thought kind of moment. And so I'm thinking like, ooh, why is it that Sol is like hell-bent on getting both Yord and Osha out of there? You know what I mean? One fell swoop, civilians to the ship, then it'd be him and the stranger alone. And I'm thinking, what are they going to talk about? What's going to happen when they're alone? What's going to be revealed if it's just the two of them? Nothing. Turns out basically nothing. But that's where my mind was going a little bit when he was like, civilians to the ship, But yeah, that is followed by another highlight of the episode, which is the fight between May and Jackie. So I thought that was really cool. It has multiple phases. There's lightsabers. There's hand-to-hand combat. There is like rolling around trying to handcuff one another segments. It is a really great fight sequence.
Yeah, just an incredible like action sequence in general there, and I guess we'll eventually talk about Jackie's fate here, but man, she gets to have some of like the best fight sequences in this episode, because I think the Jackie May fight is just incredible looking, and then her initial fight with the stranger is just so good.
Yeah, and we'll talk about her fate, as you said here, very soon, but I love her so much. I love Jackie so much, and I'm not upset about what the choice made by the creative team here to eliminate Jackie. But man, I love her. Oh my God, I already loved her. I loved her. And then, she dies in this episode, and I was like, oh no, she was the best, like this. And I feel similarly about Yord too, but I think if I had the awful power, Ryan, to choose to only keep one of them around, I think I'd have to select Jackie, because she is a highlight of the show. I think she's one of the best new characters we've seen in a long, long time. I think that's true of Yord too, though. But Jackie, I really loved her. Daphne Keane, fantastic, really great.
Yeah, I mean, she was. I think it's so interesting having those characters gone, because I think Yord was the pragmatic character who was always kind of thinking about rules and impact and not making rash choices and stuff, which I think is important to have a character like that around. And Jackie was the heart and soul of the Jedi here, which is also important to have around. And now both of them are gone.
Yeah.
And it's just Soul and his demons.
It does feel that way a little bit towards the end. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little more about each of their deaths and what it means when we kind of get to those, which is coming up pretty quickly. But the kind of next thing here in the episode is the one-on-one sequence between Soul and the stranger, which has some pretty fascinating dialogue. Soul's a badass, by the way. He is pretty impressive in a fight. We have to point out whether he is using a lightsaber or whether he is not using a lightsaber. He's pretty solid regardless. But there's this sequence here where Soul tells the stranger, "Show your face." The stranger says, "And let you read my thoughts? No, no, no," which was just so well delivered by Manny Jacinto as the stranger there. I don't know if it's Jacinto or Jacinto. I think I hear most people say Jacinto, but I feel like it would be Jacinto, but I don't know. But either way, what a killer performance from him too. I mean, we have talked about it, but I feel like his performance has been great throughout, but we weren't sure what his character was going to be or who he was going to be, and we didn't know 100% he's doing he's putting on an act of being the jester, the fool, whatever. But this episode is a showcase for him. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's just let him cook, as the kid said 6 months ago. You know what I mean? Let him cook. It was awesome.
Yeah, I think we were talking last episode, and I think we were pretty much 90-95% on board that he was going to be this the master, the stranger, whatever. And I think what's really great about his performance here is I shouldn't say that. I think going back, rewind. My big doubt last episode was that it didn't quite make sense for him with the information that we had to be that character, because he didn't have any motivation. We didn't know any reason why he would be a Sith in the woods. But then this episode, we start getting the teases of it, and it starts in this fight with Soul, where Soul is "Who are you?" and the stranger is "You wouldn't remember."
Yeah, don't you remember me, or you don't remember? He said, "You don't remember me."
Yeah.
And Soul says something like, "There's something familiar about you." But that's about as far as it goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which another thing we talked about last week is whoever the we weren't calling him the stranger at that point, but whoever the stranger is, he must be connected to what happened on Brendok in some way, right? Like we feel like there's got to be some kind of connection there. And as of now, we don't really know anything about a connection to Brendok with the stranger. And I'm not sure there will be any more, although it would still make a lot of sense for there to be some kind of connection there. Like why, you know what I mean? What is the motivation?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about that, and I think it could go two ways. Like maybe he's directly connected to what happened to May and Osha there, or maybe he has like a different vendetta against the Jedi for things that happened elsewhere, and then like kind of preyed on May because like, oh, let's do your revenge mission first because I have this bigger revenge mission. And maybe he has multiple acolytes that he's been like doing this with, like just finding people who have, you know, an issue with the Jedi and kind of like weaponizing them.
Yeah, well, and I still think he himself is the apprentice, and that there is another master waiting in the wings somewhere. The only way, well, not the only way, but I think it's very likely if that's not the case, then he would have to have been a Jedi who was trained by the Jedi, and then he has all this, you know, power and knowledge and ability, but he's got, you know, he's turned to the dark side, right? But he's so young, at least he looks so young, and it's not none of these. I mean, well, I guess Soul is. Well, Jackie sees his face, Soul sees his face, but not too many. Yord does see his face. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here, the first off, they're all dead by the end of the episode, except for Soul. But also, the point I'm trying to make here is that nobody really seems to recognize him. You know, he tells Soul, you don't know me. But I think that's more about the scene in the previous episode when he was being the bumbling fool, and they could have arrested him and they didn't. I feel like maybe that's what that was about. Although Soul's line in response does make it seem like there'd be something bigger there, you know. Oh, well, I kind of recognize you, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, Yord recognizes him and says, "You."
Yeah, but that one I did feel was like, "You." I could have arrested you last week and I let you go. You know what I mean? That's how I interpreted that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I read it more as like, they have history, but I guess they do have immediate history.
Well, and so I thought that was interesting too, because like for Yord, the show has just been a series of like him puffing his chest out and being like, everyone else learned Shriwook, but I learned, you know, whatever, and like just being. And I love the dude. Yord is awesome, but he's just always so like. I know exactly what to do because in chapter 26 of the Jedi Rulebook, it says in this moment, this is what you should do. You know, so he always has this confidence that, you know, he kind of knows what to do or whatever. And then like repeatedly, it's like he's being, you know, shown up or whatever. Actually, Jackie's idea is better than yours, so we're going to go with her plan, you know, stuff like that throughout the show. And so I feel like for him to have been in the room with the stranger, surrounding the stranger with all these Jedi, they could have stopped everything right there. You know what I mean? He was right under their fingertips and they let him go. I feel like that would be another painful failure for Yord. I don't know how the drummer from Propaganda would feel about it, but for Yord, it would be a painful failure, you know, and he let him go. So that's how I interpreted that line, but
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so the stranger says, "Oh, and let you read my thoughts." No. And Soul asks, what kind of master hides his face from his pupil? And, I mean, one of the best lines in the show so far, "You tell me," is the response from the stranger. So, just absolutely killer stuff there. Great dialogue. That was awesome.
Yeah, and then the way that, you know, that line is delivered, and then they cut to Soul's face, and he's like, "Damn, you got me."
Yeah. Now, there's only 3 episodes of the show left, and I assume that one of them will be a flashback to Brendok from another perspective. So I would say we only have 2 episodes in the primary timeline, the current timeline, left. So there's not a lot of show left, especially if one of them is a little more of a post-climax, you know, kind of denouement type thing. Then We don't have a ton of time left in this current storyline. But anyway, there's a long way of getting to the point that I want to make here, which is that I'm getting a little bit. A part of me is like, okay, I'm ready to know what it is that Soul is hiding. Like, there's been many references. We've been building and building to, like, Soul has a secret. What's the secret? Mm-hmm. I wish there were more episodes of this show, but I would not want to go 5, 6, 7 more episodes of stuff, being teased regarding what Soul. You know what I mean? Like, we got to get there pretty soon, I think. And obviously we're going to, because we don't have a lot of episodes left. But this stuff is awesome, and I love that. I love that moment. I love the look on Soul's face. I love the line of dialogue. You tell me. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like, yes, please tell me, because I'm getting ready to, like, be done being teased about this and, like, learn what it is that this big secret is.
Yeah. I mean, it's coming in the next 3 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's going to be awesome when it does, and so I don't mean to be like, oh, they're making a mistake here, they should have told us by now, and I certainly don't mean to indicate they shouldn't have included a line like this because it's going too far. No, this line whips ass. This was a great moment, so I'm not complaining about it, but I think, like, it has been hit a few times now, like, that it's clear Soul is hiding something. And I think we're getting to the point in the story where we got to find out pretty soon. I would guess I think the 7th episode. I think next week, I don't know what next week's going to be or what's going to happen. But I'm going to guess the second to last episode is going to be the flashback one. It could be next episode. It won't be the last one, right? So I think, and that's assuming there is another flashback episode, but I feel like there is. They have to go back to Brendock, I think.
Yeah. We'll see.
Right,
I'm not very excited about another flashback episode, but it does feel...
Yeah, you hated the first one.
Yeah, it does feel necessary. I think, I'm not, like, against the idea of the flashback episode. I just hope it's, like, executed well. I think is the big thing.
Oh, yeah, on that note, I saw somebody bring this up online the other day. I think it's the 7th episode is directed again by Kogonada. Is that the name of the director? I don't have it in front of me right now, but the director who directed the 3rd episode. So I think that's where the idea that the 7th one will be the other flashback episode comes in, which would make sense, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little worrisome for me. Sorry. I didn't know that. I found, that episode was just so meandering. Like,
yeah. Maybe you should watch Columbus. I haven't seen it, but I think that's the name of the film that he made.
Maybe.
You should check that one out if you get some time. And I hear it's a great movie. My son watched it. He said it was very good. You should check that out, and maybe you'd be like, oh, wow, this guy is great. He's awesome. And then when you get to episode 7, you'll be like, oh, that's just like that thing from that indie movie of his I watched,
Yeah. Okay. Maybe.
All right. This is a good moment for me to say, I wrote down, this is a note. I am now a fan of yellow lightsabers. So this show has done that for me. I think it's just a matter of time. And I know myself and my own faults. And like when Rey turned on her yellow lightsaber at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, I'm such a fundamentalist. I'm such an old curmudgeon that I'm like, yeah, but we never seen those before. Like, it's red, green, and blue. That's it. Like, this is new. There was purple, but I'm too much of a traditionalist, But you know that I love Rey, and so like, oh, okay, well, we'll let Rey have a yellow one, but I don't need to see yellow lightsabers all over town. Like, this is not for me. You know what I mean? Which is just stupid, but that's just true. That's just how I felt. But Yord with the yellow lightsaber in this show, it's been awesome. I think there's 1 or 2 other yellow lightsabers in the show too, but Yord's has been loud and proud on display quite often, and I gotta say now I love it. I see a yellow lightsaber turn on, and to me it's almost the same as a blue or a green lightsaber at this point. So I'm into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think
you didn't have the hang up I had, Ryan. You didn't have the hang up, but I had the hang up.
Yeah,
you know?
no, I don't think I care. But I think just in the context of this show, like when you do have, I think it was a really good choice because you have so many Jedi in this scene, and you are kind of like in a way like tracking them by their lightsabers at times. So I think having, you know, the having a variety of colors is a good thing here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so from there we go back to Jackie and the Stranger, which is super, super sweet. We've talked a little bit about, you know, how great Jackie is. I don't think we've talked about Jackie versus the Stranger in their fight specifically. One highlight of that for me is Jackie using 2 lightsabers at one point. I think she's using Kalnaka's and her own. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She was awesome.
For a moment. Yep. Yeah.
She was awesome.
Very
and obviously,
resourceful.
again, Attack of the Clones vibes on that one for sure, you know, so very Anakin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was straight out of that Dooku fight. You know, you got one Jedi down, there's just that lightsaber sitting there.
Yeah. Although, I'm not sure that I like prefer the direction style of one over the other, but I do think in Attack of the Clones, like when Anakin's using the 2 lightsabers, the way it's directed is a little more like, oh, check out how badass this is. Like, bro's got 2 lightsabers right now. You know what I mean? It really it's more heightened in the way it's being presented. It's definitely more like stylistic in that way, or just kind of being like, you guys have seen one-on-one lightsaber action before, but check out bro with 2 lightsabers now, you know? And I think that's fun. I think that's awesome. Like for a pulpy action movie, and, you know, I think that totally works and is really cool. That being said, I do appreciate how in this episode and the way it's directed here, it's less like that, and it's more like we're going. And yeah, for 15 seconds in this sequence, she does have 2 lightsabers, and she is like rocking using those 2 lightsabers, the positioning, the acting, the skill there. It's awesome, and it looks really, really great, but we're not really gonna like, you know, slow things down or be like, woohoo, check this out, like with the direction style, the way that like something like Attack of the Clones does.
Yeah, I mean, again, like the word I used at the beginning was just grounded for these fights. Like, this feels like people fighting. And, like, it's obviously incredibly well choreographed, but there's more of, like, an urgency than just a visual spectacle here. Because I think, you know, you think back to that fight in Attack of the Clones, like eventually you get to the point with like just the it's just like flashing colors at one point, and then, you know, you go from that into like Yoda, like, you know, all the money shots and the flipping around and all of that stuff like that. That is lightsaber combat as a spectacle, whereas like this is like people trying to, you know, subdue or kill the other person and survive themselves.
Yeah, there's a little more urgency and a little more. It does feel like the stakes are pretty high, obviously, in Attack of the Clones too, in some of those sequences, but this feels a little more life and death in some ways, and yeah.
I mean, it literally is. Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of death. That's true.
Yeah. I think, like, just on this note, like, a really general thing that, you know, I was texting to you and Kevin was this felt like this episode felt like the most danger we've experienced in Star Wars in I don't know how long. Like, there is just like a really high sense of stakes and danger here, and like there's always stakes in like all this, you know, recent Star Wars movies and shows, but for so many of the characters, we, like, you know, in Andor, huge stakes, but we also kind of know the fate of everyone in that show to some degree, or we can make assumptions about the fates of, you know, the people that we don't quite know.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think like the Filoni-verse shows are still kind of in that, you know, a little bit in that like cartoon mentality where it's like, you know, none of the main characters are going to die. Like, you know, maybe once we get to like the end or something, but like, you know, when, you know, in Ahsoka, when Sabine gets like stabbed with the lightsaber, there was like no point where I was like, oh my God, she's dead. Like, this is all happening. Like, they're all gonna die. Like, there was no point. I was like, okay, she'll be fine next episode. Like, what? It's just part of the story. But like, here, there is just this like total sense of danger, and you feel it from the beginning, where like anything could happen here to these characters, and you know, I don't really know how I kind of like sensed it, but I was like, you know, I was not surprised by any of the main character deaths in this show, and I think it is because they just set it up to be like, yep, stakes are high, this is dangerous, this enemy is strong, and people may not survive.
Yeah. From there, May, because she's been rescued or whatever, well, actually, I don't know. I guess we skipped over at some point. May convinces Yord they need to go back, right? And Osha convinces, or maybe that's coming up here. That's right. Yeah. Okay. See, I'm getting confused about who's May and who's Osha here, which is dumb. But
it's only going to get worse by the end of the episode.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. No, May is on her own in the forest, and she hears the stranger's voice inside her head, calling her a coward, saying you were going to betray me. But I loved it because there was some like Last Jedi type stuff going on here, where it would just like flash, or even. Well, yeah, I guess maybe that's another Star Wars stuff too, even almost in Revenge of the Sith and various places, but like where it would flash to a real close-up shot on the stranger's mask, and then it would flash back to May, and back to his mask, and back to May. And I thought it was just a subtle enough but effective way of telling us, like, he's in her head. You know what I mean? Like, this is what she's like. She's haunted by him right now. Mm-hmm. She's hearing his voice. He's saying these things to her, and he's like, he's in her head, you know? So I thought that was a great way to do that. Like, I mean, it's the most obvious way to do it, but it's also the most effective, you know, instead of having some dumb, like, effect on the screen, or, you know, there's so many, like, sort of cheesy or, like, heavy-handed ways they could have done it, and just to, like, flash to his face, like, quick cuts, like, a real quick cut to his face back to her. I thought that was really well done.
It almost feels like he's, like, moving towards her. Like, in those cuts too. I think there is, like, the background is moving behind him, which I just felt like those were really, like, unsettling shots. Like, I thought it was a really, really cool effect. It was almost like horror movie-esque.
Oh, big time. Yeah, and you're right. That's a good point, because it's not only, I think it's the quick cuts, you know, I think that's it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's the pacing of the cuts that makes it feel almost like you're going, like, boom, boom, like, back and forth between. But then also there is, whether it's, like, him being pushed, oops, I got my finger, okay, him being pushed, like, towards the camera, or the camera pushing towards him, or maybe just some kind of, like, the background moving away from him. But there's some sense of movement of him, like, coming forward, kind of thing, like almost like he's on a track being pulled towards her or something.
Yeah.
It's cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So then it kind of cut back to the battle between Soul and the stranger, and May. Because they kind of all intervene there, or kind of come together in that space. And something that I noticed that I thought was really cool earlier in the episode, the stranger uses a force pull to impale two people. We talked about that, right? Or impale a person on the lightsaber where the other person's already being impaled. Soul uses a force pull here to save May. He pulls May away from the stranger towards Jecki, And I don't know if that was intentional or, force pulls are pretty common. I guess it's not really, maybe some big thing, but I thought that was pretty cool that you have the dark side user using the force pull in a way that is aggressive and attack, and then the Jedi is using the force pull in defense and, to save somebody.
Yeah, that's good.
You're still suspicious of Soul. I see it on your face. You're like, yeah, but he's not that cool, so I don't know, but...
I mean, all will be revealed.
All right, okay. And then, now this time it is Osha. We're hearing, or Osha is hearing somebody's voice in her head, and this is when she tells Yord, like, we have to go back, because she's hearing this voice in her head or whatever. And I'm now... like 95% convinced it's May, which I think makes the most sense, right? They're basically a dyad or something, right? They're connected to one another. So like that makes a ton of sense. But when I first watched, I was like, oh, is that Jecki? Like, is she hearing Jecki? Because she's like, we got to go back. And I feel like, what she's been saying to Yord is like, they need us. We need to go back and help, Jecki and Soul and Yord. Well, she's with Yord, but we need to go back and help Jecki and Soul. So it's almost like, is she hearing Jecki's voice in her head? And there were scenes between her and Jecki that really made it feel like they had a strong connection. So
yeah,
I was like, that'd be cool if it was Jecki, kind of projecting to her or whatever. But I think it's Osha. I mean, it's May, which makes more sense, really.
I think it's May too.
Yeah.
But that just made me think about how heartbreaking that scene between Osha and Jecki at the Jedi Temple is now, where they're like, we should hang out, go to a cantina.
Yeah, when I come back, we'll share stories about Soul. We'll have fun at his expense or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. And anyway, so then we cut back to the action. Soul almost defeats the stranger even without his lightsaber, because he's using his lightsaber, and then like the stranger's able to use, and we should talk about this quickly, I guess. Cortosis, I believe, is the thing, kind of like Beskar, but it has some properties that interfere with the Force, and I guess lightsabers too now. So the stranger is able to kind of like momentarily disable lightsabers, which is part of how he's able to survive this. He can momentarily disable lightsabers. So his helmet and his gauntlet on his arm are both made of this. I think it's called cortosis. I think that's what it is. They're made of that. And so he's able to disable those things. And he disables Soul's lightsaber, and Soul still almost takes him out, which I thought was pretty impressive, like just hand-to-hand stuff, which does get a little more into the kind of martial arts film kind of style action.
Yeah, he's like straight up like punching him in the mask.
Yeah,
which is wild. That's pretty BA. I like it.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, but it's ultimately Jecki that breaks that helmet, which I thought was a pretty big win for her as the Padawan or whatever. She's ultimately the one who gets in there and breaks that helmet. So that was like a pretty great moment for about 2 seconds, where it's like, all right, yeah, Jecki taking care of business, and then boom,
boom, boom.
Yeah. Which, man, super sad, but overall, like, this is done so well, this moment, because it is, like I said, it's a little bit of a fist pumper there, where you see Jecki break the helmet, and then you're immediately deflated when you see the first, second, and then third, examples of him stabbing her with the lightsaber. And I think, that punctuates it pretty well. Like, she's dead when he gets her multiple times with the lightsaber there. It then cuts to her face, very sad, right? Emotional, like you really feel the weight of the fact that she's dying in that moment. And then she falls to her knees, and then her falling to her knees, it reveals the identity of the stranger.
Yeah.
That was super awesome.
It's so well done. It's so good.
Yeah. It was exciting, it was emotional, and then it was shocking. So in the span of like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
They killed it.
Yeah.
And they killed Jecki, which breaks my heart because I loved her. But yeah, iconic. Like, it's going to be an iconic sequence, an iconic moment. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, Jackie dies, and then Soul. I didn't write down exactly what his line is to the stranger, but he says something like, well, I think he just says Jackie, like, or whatever. Like he sees his Padawan die in that moment. Do you remember off the top of your head what the stranger's response to Soul is in that moment? When Soul
is that when he says you brought her here?
That's coming up.
Okay.
It's coming up.
Was that its name?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh.
No. I mean, I'm like so mad. I'm so angry at that point because I love Jackie so much. And then for him to oh yeah. No. He's a villain. He's a bad dude, Ryan.
Very bad. Yeah.
But killer delivery of that line, just like every line he has. Soul responds with that she was a child, and then as you point out, he says, well, you brought her here, but he delivers it with this shrug, like, I guess she was, but that's on you, guy. You're the one who brought her here.
Yeah. So, yeah, it cuts deep. Yeah.
It does cut deep, and the stranger's powerful, obviously. Like, he is a force to be reckoned with. He's dangerous, he's scary, but also he is very good at the Sith, the Palpatine, whatever, like, force you to doubt yourself, figure out what your biggest insecurity is, and then really just like hammer that, right? Because that's what he's doing to Soul throughout there. So
yeah.
And then for the lore hounds out there, I think, don't you sometimes describe yourself as a bit of a lore hound, Ryan? I think I've heard you call yourself that before, haven't I?
Absolutely not. No.
Oh, okay. But for the lore hounds out there, this is a moment where Soul's like, "What are you?" And the stranger says, "I have no name, but a Jedi like you might call me a Sith." Pretty cool. What do you think about that? Do you think he's a Sith?
Okay, what does that have to do with lore hounds?
Oh, because people are like, there's a bunch of people out there who are like, whoa, he cannot be a Sith. There's no way he's a Sith because I heard Ki-Adi-Mundi say in The Phantom Menace that the Sith have not returned for a millennia, so therefore he can't be a Sith, so he could be dark side faction A, B, or C, but definitely not a Sith. There's no Sith. That's like, it can't be a Sith.
You know what this sounds like to me, John? Sounds
an absolute?
Like a plot hole.
Oh, God. Oh,
time to make a 4-hour YouTube video.
It better not be a plot
hole.
hole.
So much disrespect to George.
It better not be a plot hole because I can't watch stuff with plot holes. I hate it when something has a plot hole.
No, I mean, who cares? I think, like, this is, whether he's Sith or not Sith, he's doing very Sithy things. He's being manipulative and dishonest, like a Sith. He's using a red lightsaber, like a Sith. It was the same thing we went through with Kylo Ren in the, at the beginning of the sequel trilogy. Like, is he a Sith, or is he not? Like, I mean, does it matter? Like,
yeah.
And he can say it, he can be it, he cannot be it, whatever it is. Like, he's both, I think, like Kylo Ren at the beginning of the sequel trilogy and the stranger here are at the very least very Sith inspired.
Yeah, and it doesn't ultimately matter to me, but I think, like, people who would point to, like, it can't be a Sith because of what, they say in the prequels. Like, I'm pretty sure also at the end of The Phantom Menace, Yoda turns to Obi-Wan and is like, or it's Mace Windu, he turns to Mace Windu and he's like, well, always two there are, no more, no less. And he's not like, always two there were thousands of years ago until the Jedi exterminated the Sith, and then there haven't been any. There's been zero the whole time. There's been none. There haven't been any. Like, that's not what he's saying, And so when Ki-Adi-Mundi's like, oh, well, the Sith haven't returned for a millennia, I think he means maybe more like, I don't know, there's a couple dudes out there in a cave somewhere who are, continuing the threat or whatever, but they're not doing anything with it. They don't have any power. You know what I mean? There's no, like, threat from them. I think that's really what it means. And also, if it was supposed to mean, like, we haven't seen any, like, they're extinct, because he does use that word too, I guess, extinct, right? Like, who cares? Fine. Well, he was wrong. You know what I mean? Or whatever.
Will not be the first time for Ki-Adi-Mundi to be wrong.
Yeah, maybe that's what he said to one of his wives. Maybe he said something to a different wife. You know what I mean? We don't know, right? But yeah, I couldn't care. I couldn't care less in terms of like if it breaks something already established. But I will say that I think if he is a Sith, I think that's exciting. I think it's cool to get a look at, because to me, I've always felt like always two, there are no more, no less. That means there have always been two in hiding or just whatever, like through all those thousands of years or hundreds of years, whatever. There's always been two. They haven't amounted to anything. They haven't accomplished anything, but they've been waiting in the wings, right? And I like that personally better than they were extinct. They didn't exist, period. And then someone decided to pick up that mantle at the time of, the prequels, or I guess at the end of the High Republic or whatever. But even if it's that, maybe this is what's happening now. They're picking up that mantle because they got to get that ball rolling again in order for Palpatine and Darth Plagueis and all those people to exist as Sith too, right?
Yeah, I think there's so many ways that this like could make sense. Like, and okay, like go back to like Return of the Jedi when they're like, well, there's only one Jedi that exists, and the entire like original trilogy, it's like it's all on Luke. Like he is the only Jedi in the world, in the galaxy, and then they're like, well, or maybe Leia, but then like over the past decade, like we've had like, okay, well there's also Ahsoka, and there's also Grogu, and there's also like Cal Kestis, and like all these, there's like, okay, there's all these other there, it's not just Luke. And then with like the Sith thing, I think like, the always two there are like, that's it's a killer line, and it like sets up everything in Phantom Menace really well, but it's like, are there is it there are only two Sith in the entire galaxy, or there are multiple Sith but they work in pairs, like, but there's also like, and that's just even assuming that like we can take him at his word, and even like his word isn't like definitive, because he's like, you might refer to me as Sith, and it's like, okay, maybe maybe that means like he is like straight up Sith, or he's just like, hey, I'm doing Sithy things, you could call this Sith. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we'll find out. We'll get more definitive answers before the show's over. And, again, it's semantics at a certain point, too. But, I think it does open up some interesting, like the whole rule of two thing, I think does open up some interesting ideas. Number one, the show is already talking about the power of two, the power of many, you know what I mean? And, like, you have May and Osha as, like, a pair. Then you have master and apprentice relationships, like Soul and Osha. There's multiple examples of like, kind of pairing off characters and like, exploring that from a thematic perspective, I guess you'd say. So I think we could see that from the dark side too, and the rule 2 like kind of could work in that way, but also just like maybe more interestingly, the stranger wants an acolyte, right? And I think like the use of that term, the acolyte, that's interesting because he doesn't say, I want a Sith apprentice, you know what I mean? I'm going to be the master and I'm looking for my apprentice. Like he says he wants an acolyte, and there's some implication that he's kind of like testing May out as the possible one, but maybe he's testing other people, well, he collects people, how he is, right? So like, I guess what I'm trying to say here is I have always felt, and still do now, that he is himself an apprentice to a master, so there's your two, but then he's also trying to acquire people to be his apprentice when he kills the master. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think the rule of two is what it is with the Sith, and I think I would take that, pretty literally, and not just like, oh, it was a cool line, but I think like it is like the lore, or whatever you want to say it is the ideology and the methodology of the Sith. But I don't care if, there's a master, the stranger's the apprentice, the stranger himself has an apprentice, but like, not officially, or like not fully, but like that's what May is, right? He's working with her, trying to bring her in to be that, right? Because it's like when it's exactly the same, in fact, as Palpatine, Dooku, but then Palpatine is grooming Anakin to be the apprentice. Literally is. That's what he's doing. He's grooming, and he's grooming Anakin to be that
word
apprentice.
just has like very different connotations these days.
No, I know. But I mean, I'm using it in that term, not because I think the result is he's trying to have the same result as people who, when we might use that term more so these days. But I think the methodology is the same. It's the manipulation. It's the dishonesty. It is the false promises and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And the controlling. So anyway, but it's just the same as that, right? I mean, that's what Palpatine's doing with Anakin. He has an apprentice in Dooku, and yet he is prepping Anakin to replace Dooku. And so very much this could be that, except for it's not the master doing it, it's the apprentice doing that, and there is a Sith master out there,
Yeah, which is what we saw in Force Unleashed. It all comes back to Force Unleashed. We have, Palpatine and Vader, but Vader's got his secret apprentice. He's got that Star Killer.
Yeah, I experienced that story a little bit, and then I actually called Soul and asked him to come in and do like a Jedi mind trick on me and wipe that story from my brain, so I don't actually really remember too many details of what happened in the Force Unleashed.
Poor choice. The Force Unleashed is the key to all of this.
Oh, it's the key to all of this. Okay, cool. Star Killer. So he says, I have no name, which I love that too. Like, I love that, like, in the description on StarWars.com or whatever, that poster I sent you, it describes him as like, he doesn't have a name, or his name isn't known, but he uses the identity of Khmer to fool people or something like that. So, because we've been talking about, like, is Khmer the Sith? Like, Khmer is a mask that he wears. Khmer is an identity he made up, right? It's something he's discarded now. He doesn't need that fake identity anymore. So it's less like, like when Anakin becomes Darth Vader, you're like, okay, well, yeah, he's Anakin Skywalker who has now become Darth Vader. But I think the way it's being described here in this, character biography or whatever on StarWars.com is more like, oh, he was never Khmer to begin with. He's always been the stranger. That's who he is. You know what I mean? And he decided for a few years or whatever, like, I'll make up this character. I'll make up this persona. I'll pretend to be this person, Khmer, but that's not who he is. And I find that kind of haunting and pretty cool.
Yeah. Yep. It's very good.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add. I love that. Like, just that is the mask. The teeth mask is not the mask. The mask is the dude.
Yeah. Yeah. But Soul asks him what he wants, and he says, I want freedom to use my power. I want an acolyte. And then, and this is just like the highlights of what he says, not the exact dialogue, but I want the freedom to use my power without the Jedi, like, trying to control what I do or how I use it. I want an acolyte. And then there's a great moment where he's like, the Jedi say I can't exist. Like, by the rules of the Jedi, I can't exist. So you guys, with your dogma and your rules and your government and everything, have set up a situation in which I have to lash out. I have to, do this stuff. I actually have to kill everybody here because they've seen my face. See my face, you die, right? Because the Jedi have said I can't exist. And I just thought that was, bullshit, because, like, he's the villain and he's, evil or whatever in this Star Wars universe. But also really, really good. Really, really good in terms of, victimizing him, the victim stancing, we call it, and just like putting himself in a position where I'm the victim, you made me do this.
Yeah, and I mean, he's obviously he's evil. He's being manipulative. He's rationalizing evil through this, but like it is interesting. Like this is all we know about this character, and I don't know if we do need to like know more. I don't know if we need flashbacks or anything, but like it's interesting to try to like read between the lines or read the lines at face value, and wonder if like it's all connected. I think like the Jedi kind of imposing their will on the coven that May and Osha are from, and being like, well, you can't train children, you can't be homeschooling magic over here. Like I think that is connected to like whatever the stranger's powers were, whatever like his training was, knowing that the Jedi would put a stop to it. And I think like right now he's making like a pretty good case for these space cops, like shutting this stuff down, because he's obviously using it to his powers to be evil. But it does like it just creates this like very interesting conflict here, where it's like the Jedi are like 90% like 80-90% in the right here, but like they're not what they're doing with like kind of policing magic and powers and all of this force use here, like it's also like it's not great either, and it does kind of create it's creating big conflicts because of it. So yes. I don't know. Yes, you have to like wonder if like again, like bring it really does kind of come down to like the conversations, especially in the last 5 years, we've had about in our society about like policing. Like, does like having more police like stop crime, or does it like increase it when there's like a tighter grip on things? Like in is it the best use of resources, etc. It really is like a fascinating concept to kind of explore in this way.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think it's very interesting in terms of how those things are being presented. There's certainly some truth in what he's saying. I think for sure, my opinion is that the show definitely wants to explore the ways in which the institution of the Jedi has flaws and is headed towards its destruction, before its rebirth by Rey in the New Jedi. But anyway, it's destruction here in the prequel trilogy, and so I think it does want to explore those things, and I think it does want to identify some of the reasons, some of the fault lines, some of the problems within that institution. I also think it wants to present the Jedi mostly as a force of a positive force, the good guys, quote unquote. And I think there's some people watching the show and coming into the show that were maybe hoping to see like, actually the Jedi were wrong, and actually the Sith are kind of the good guys in a way because they're justified, and whatever. And like, I don't think the show is interested in that personally. I don't think like that's where we're headed. Like, where it's because Leslie hasn't talked about like, well, this show is more from the perspective of the villains, and things like that, right? But yeah, I think what the show is doing and what a show like this can do is, and what George did in the prequels, is present the flaws allow us as an intelligent audience to watch and say, hey, they're making some mistakes. Like you said, what they're doing is not always great. You know what I mean? And also walk away from it and say, that doesn't mean I'm going to sign up for the Sith side of things, right? You know what I mean? Like, you don't watch the original trilogy and go, no, the original trilogy doesn't really try to present the good guys as being super flawed or anything. But if they did, we wouldn't say, now I'm going to go join the Empire, right? Like, that's not what it's trying to do. And obviously.
It's not a gotta hear both sides New York Times article.
Yes, here. Right. The show can present these flaws. It can acknowledge those flaws. It's still a good guys versus bad guys story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I think it does also give the viewer a lot more to kind of chew on than what, I would say like the maybe like Marvel approach to like good guys and bad guys. I think there's a little bit more here to kind of like have to work through, and it is like really kind of feeding into the larger vision of what went wrong with the Jedi Order that begins in the Phantom Menace.
Yes. All right, let's keep moving. After this, Yord comes in to save the day. He gets a pretty sweet moment, with where he kind of jumps in with that yellow lightsaber. He saves Osha, I think, or maybe saves Sol. Saves somebody in that moment. I forget now. But then is pretty quickly destroyed by the stranger.
Yeah, and, but what's cool about this when he jumps in, because it's to save May.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You see in the shot, you see the mask, the helmet on the ground, and then it like flies up into Yord's hand, and then he deflects the stranger's lightsaber with it. Oh,
that's right.
And shorts out his lightsaber.
Yes, so he disables that lightsaber. Yes, so that's awesome. But then that results in the brutal death that Yord receives at the hands of the stranger there, because he can't kill him with a lightsaber. So instead, he snaps his neck. He just twists his head right there on the neck and just instantly takes him out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the most brutal death in Star Wars. Like,
yeah, I would say so.
It's so, because I think of like what are some other like brutal moments. I think like Darth Maul getting chopped in half, Dooku getting decapitated, Snoke in the throne room, like, but like all of those are kind of like you were saying in that like heightened combat approach. Jango Fett, like, whereas like this is like there's no like lightsaber, there's no like cauterizing wounds or anything here. It is just like a straight up like neck snap. Like
the only on-screen deaths I've ever worried a little bit about showing my kids when they were younger was really the only one I ever really worried about was I guess Dooku's decapitation a little bit, but mostly Anakin, not his death, but Anakin being on Mustafar.
Yeah,
that's maybe the most graphic and brutal, and maybe that still is a little more graphic and brutal than this. But this is pretty. It's just longer. You know what I mean? You watch him suffering, so I think that's like pretty traumatic on Mustafar at the end of Revenge of the Sith, obviously. But this is still pretty intense, and it does cut to his body laying there with his eyes open later on too. So it's hardcore. Yeah. Okay, so then after that, Sol bests the stranger in hand-to-hand combat. Like, he whoops him, and he's got him, and he could execute him, and he's about to with his lightsaber. Reminding me a little bit, and even the camera angle reminded me a little bit of Luke standing over Ben Solo in The Last Jedi. But yeah, he's about to swing that lightsaber. He's about to kill the stranger, which, you know, for the galaxy would probably have been a good thing. For Soul on a personal level would not have been a good thing. And Osha stops him, I believe, right? Osha stops him. Just shouts his name, and is all she needs to say, really, for him to say, like, yes, this is not like what the Jedi would do. And he turns off his lightsaber, he throws it down on the ground, and he says something along the lines of, the Jedi do not attack the unarmed. And obviously that's an idea the show has been discussing and talking about throughout, right? And something that the stranger, you know, was insisting that may do, you know, is get them to, you know, compromise their values. So it would have been a victory for the stranger in that regard if Soul did that. And who knows, maybe he would have been able to, I don't know, escape death in that moment somehow, dodge. I don't know what he would have done, but yeah, I think it would have been a moral victory in that regard, a moral failing or defeat for Soul, and Osha stops him.
Yeah, but before that, you know, the stranger looks at Osha and is like, you trust him after everything he did to you, and Soul's like, you know, this dude's a wreck. His mind is twisted by darkness. Don't trust him. And the stranger says something along the lines of, you know, I've made peace with I've accepted my darkness. What have you done with yours?
Yes, exactly. I've accepted my darkness. Great. What have you done with yours? Yep.
Pretty great.
It is great. Yeah. Yeah, and at that moment, like, Soul is unarmed, you know what I mean? And then I think the stranger gets his lightsaber back, right? Like, pulls the lightsaber to him. He's a threat in some way at that point. I think he gets the lightsaber back, right? Whatever it is.
He reaches for it. He's ready to go. And then that's when... he gets it, and then that's, like... he's moving towards Soul, and that's when Osha throws Pip.
Yeah, but not before saying "I love you, Pip," and then throwing Pip at the stranger with that bright light on, which then attracts the cicada monster things. And I thought this was okay. If I have a complaint about the episode, this might be one of my complaints about the episode, this way of dispatching momentarily the stranger. Clunky's not the right word, but it's corny. I don't know. Everything felt so weighty and so, you know, cool in this episode. And then, well, we'll just make the bugs come pull him away. It was a little, it just didn't feel like it fit very well tonally, or, you know, it's just a different kind of vibe that moment.
Yeah, it was a very, like, Clone Wars cartoon moment. I don't love this either, and like it's well done. I get it. Like I appreciate like the writing, and like they've set this up over the course of 2 episodes. Like it totally tracks, but you know, I feel like they had also been like weirdly heavy-handed about this. Like, there's, like, multiple times over the course of, like, these 2 episodes where it is explained to us that the bugs are attracted by light. And, you know, even when, you know, Yord and Osha are, like, you know, deciding to go back, and, like, Osha's, like, I have an idea, and she, like, you know, takes Pip and shines him up into the trees, and... you know, all the setup for this, it does feel like weirdly out of place, just how heavy-handed the explanation is for a scene that's just kind of goofy and like doesn't actually matter in comparison to everything else that's happening. So yeah, I would say this is the one moment where in this episode that didn't work for me, but you know, it serves the purpose of getting the stranger just off the screen for a moment, because he is this like unrelenting threat, the entire time, and like you cannot have Osha and Soul or anyone having a conversation when he is like right there. So you do kind of have to like get him far away. So, you know, I guess having like Bugs go take him away, like it works in service of the story, but like it still feels a little goofy in the context of everything else that's happening.
Yeah. Yep. So from there, May and Osha have a scene together where they come across each other, I think, in the woods or whatever. Like they come into contact with one another again. Or does Osha sees her and...
Well, May takes out Soul.
May takes out Soul?
Yeah, that's how... Because, like, Osha and Soul are having a conversation, and then May is standing behind him and, like, shoots him with the stun ray.
Okay. I knew the stun ray came in there. That's right. Okay, so May takes out Soul.
Then Soul is out of the conversation, and it's just May and Osha.
Okay, yeah. And May's whole thing in that scene to Osha is, like, we can be together again, like... You know, she's got some great lines to Osha. They've brainwashed you. I can help you return to yourself. May's like, no, you are a criminal. Like, you are doing really bad stuff. Like, I can't ignore that, right? Essentially. May says, I love you. Don't choose them again. Please choose us, you know? Yeah, I think the scene ends with the two of them hugging and the camera's like on, or maybe not ends, but it cuts to something else and cuts back, I think. But there's a moment where the camera's just like on Osha's face as May is hugging her, and Osha's got a look on her face like, I don't know what to do with this, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, but ultimately what Osha decides to do is try to arrest May, you know? Tries to arrest her, and the takeaway from that scene is that the both of them are claiming the other one is following false masters or a false master or whatever, right? Like Osha's like, this guy, the stranger, that's who you're aligned with. He's bad news. May's like, the Jedi are liars. They stole you, you know, from us. Osha's position is like, they didn't steal me. I wanted to go. What are you talking about, right? Like, and ultimately, I think obviously that might have a lot to do with Soul's little secret that he's, you know, not sharing is how and why did Osha end up leaving with the Jedi. But yeah, so this you know, kind of powerful sequence between these two sisters who are alone for a moment in this scene together. And again, May's position is what May's position has always been. You know, the Jedi are wrong. They steal children. And ultimately, she didn't really care about that. I don't think what she cares about is like, we were a family. We were together on Brendok, and the Jedi screwed that up, and you chose them instead of us, and I need you to choose us. I need you to choose me and us and our family again.
Yeah. There's so much happening in this scene. First, there's an establishing shot, and this is something we talked about last episode, as like the sun is setting throughout the last episode. Before this scene, there's an establishing shot that shows the sun rising, and then in the background of this scene, it is like there's a sunrise happening. So it, you know, it puts the viewer in this weird place of being like, okay, are we solving this? Is this,
it's a good thing happening here?
Yeah. And I don't know, like it's really tough with May, because she is like obviously very conflicted. She really feels like she knows an absolute truth, you know, in the same way, you know, Ben Solo did and Anakin Skywalker did. They feel like they know what's going on. And, you know, there's some, you know, in some ways they're right, but they've also been kind of manipulated. And then when they actually hug, like May is legitimately crying. Like there are like tears running down her face, and then it cuts to Osha, and like you were saying, Osha's like, what is happening? Like, what do I do? Like,
Yeah.
And I think like that's great, and the fact that this scene is like cut really well, using the same actress, here, having a conversation, which is just really well done. Great scene.
Yeah. So in that moment, at the end of that sequence, May ends up knocking Osha out, right? And tells her, "You never could block. You never could block," which was like a callback to that opening episode, or opening, I guess, to the Brendock episode, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So after that sequence, she's knocked out, and then May hatches her big plan. Okay, May cuts off her hair with a really cool slashing lightsaber move, right?
Yeah, using Yord's lightsaber.
I think so, because it's yellow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So she cuts off her hair so that she can change her appearance. At one point, I was watching this episode and I was thinking, like, wait, is this what she's been planning on doing? Like, was this like a plan that the Stranger and May have had all along? But I don't think that makes any sense. Like, rewatching the episodes, I think there's too much conflict between May and the Stranger. But for a minute, I was like, that'd be cool if actually, like, she was never going to betray him. Actually, like, they just, like, I guess what caused me to think that is there's the moment in this episode where he's standing there holding the lightsaber to her head, talking to the Jedi. And it's like he's about to kill May, and the Jedi actually save May, because otherwise, like, the Stranger was going to kill her, right? But I was thinking to myself, like, that'd be cool if actually this was a ploy the whole time, and he was never going to do that. But the intention is to do this flip. But I don't think it doesn't make any sense. Like, that couldn't work.
Because a bunch that conflicts with like a bunch of moments, like you were saying, the conflict between them and like her, tying him up and all of that, because she doesn't know.
Yeah. But the result is that they are able to switch places here at the end of the episode. So May is going to be with Sol, and you can tell that Sol is like, because she goes back to Sol and she's like, we got to get to the ship or whatever, and you can tell that Sol's like, wait, what's going on? What's happening here? And I think he can tell kind of something's wrong, but ultimately doesn't totally know that. And then go ahead.
Yeah, I think like it's tough, because like he should be able to sense Osha versus May, but like he's also, I think the way it's like kind of portrayed here, like he was just knocked out. He's like groggy and delirious, and she's May is dressed in Osha's clothes, and she has the same hair, and he does have this like look of like, wait, what's going on, and he's like kind of questioning it, but then she's like, we gotta move, and he's just like, okay, and just goes.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I guess he should be able to tell the difference, but they are painted as like two parts of the same whole. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know how it works, like identifying somebody's presence in the Force or whatever, but I could see an argument where it's like, well, they're the same person almost to a degree, so maybe he can't tell. You know what I mean? But yeah, as you point out, he's not exactly on his game 100% either, right? He's just gone through all kinds of stuff here. So, yeah. But so they go back to the ship. You see the cool alien dudes again. They get back on the ship.
Playing chess. Space chess. Yeah.
Yeah, they get back on the ship, but and so it seems like this is trouble, right? Because May is with the Jedi, and who knows what kind of havoc she's going to wreak. But Ryan, our guy Basil, is there. He found Pip in the woods. He gets back to the ship, and I believe the implication is that Basil knows it's not Osha, and so we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, it's so great. Like them walking there, and then like the camera stays like focused on like the shot down the hallway of the ship, and then you just like see his like face peek around the corner, and then he always looks like very concerned and stressed out, and
it's a tough existence.
He's just got that face, and then he like walks towards them, so it'll be very interesting to see how all that shakes out.
Yeah. Okay, and then the conclusion of the episode is the stranger standing over Osha. Standing over Osha, and he delivers some bad guy dialogue about how even in the revelation of our triumphs we see the depth of our despair, and that's where the episode ends. Yeah. So I'm kind of at my time limit here, Ryan. I'm sure we could continue to discuss this great episode of The Acolyte, but I'm a little bit at my time limit here, so we've got to wrap up. As we do you have like predictions for next week? Do you have expectations of where things are going to go? What are you hoping to see next week? Where are you at with that?
I'm just ready for what comes next. Honestly, they did, this was just a phenomenal episode. One of, I would say, the best episodes of Star Wars TV ever. And I'm just along for the ride. They, right when you thought like there could not possibly be any more like twists or mysteries, like I think swapping the twins is like, of course that would happen.
Yeah.
But like it was not something I was expecting, and it's like, well, yeah, if you have twins, like you need to do this. Like
sure.
Make the most of it, and man, I'm just along for the ride, and I am so ready for next episode.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too. I don't have if I thought about it, I could come up with some predictions or whatever, I guess, but I don't really think I know where it's going to go, and I just think like the roles being swapped is going to lead to some really interesting stuff. I think we're going to pretty soon find out more about what Soul's hiding. I'm very interested to see like how does Soul react to all this, and what's his mental state going to be next week, or where is he going to be emotionally in next week's episode. So I think that's really interesting to see for sure.
And it's going to be interesting because he's going to probably admit everything that happened, but he'll be admitting it to May and not Osha.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point, because even in episode 4, he's like, when we get back to the ship, I'll tell you everything. You know what I mean? So, yeah, and now, like, it's very clear, like, they're on the ship. That's where this episode ends. So, yeah, that's a great point. But, yeah, no, I've really loved the show from throughout. But these last 2 episodes were just so good that I'm excited for whatever they want to deliver, So, but let's go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you very much for listening. We will, of course, be back next week with another episode talking about the next episode of The Acolyte. Until then, you can find everything we do at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. Love to hear what you think about the show and this week's episode. You could email us, blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. The show is on Blue Sky, so you can message us there. We have a Discord. The link is in the show notes. You could join our Discord and chat about Star Wars and The Acolyte there. Or you can follow Ryan on social media. Ryan, where?
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky, personal account via Malay. My other gaming account, DefStan480.
All right, cool. So thanks again for listening, and we will be back soon with another episode of the Blockade Runner Podcast.